So it's a great honor to be with you. And so my name is Kevin Thompson, married to my wife, Jenny, for 24 years, originally from Arkansas, where I pastored a church for 19 years. And then we moved to Sacramento 3 years ago. So I have a daughter who is 19 who has Down syndrome, so a little different scenario. And then a son who is 16, who's a junior in high school. My daughter is actually going to a program at UC Davis. So she started college last week, which is a very kind of different scenario for us. And so we're beginning to experience what empty nest life kind of is. Let me just kind of tell you, sometimes we have these stories, these seminal stories that it's just one story, but it kind of tells the picture of what somebody is like. And so many people will hear that I have a daughter with Down syndrome. And so they will think to themselves, oh, they're the most loving people ever. And Ella is loving. But she will also punch you in the face if she needs to at any given moment. And so when Ella was little, I'll never forget, she's in preschool. I went to pick her up one day, and the preschool instructor said, hey, Kevin, had a small problem today. Ella kicked one of her teachers. And I said, oh, my goodness, I'll get home. I'll have a talk with her, And so I get her home, and I have the talk. I said, Ella, did you kick one of your teachers today? And she said, no, Daddy, I didn't. And so I put her in timeout and then pulled her back out and said, Ella, did you kick one of your teachers today? No, Daddy, I didn't. Gave her this whole lecture about the importance of telling the truth and how we can work through things and it doesn't matter. But she was stubborn, said, no, I didn't kick my teacher. Put her back in timeout, called her back out of timeout, and I said, all right, Ella, this is your last chance. If you do not tell me the truth, you're going to be in double trouble. Did you kick one of your teachers today? In the midst of tears, she said, no, Daddy, I didn't. I kicked both of them. So that's kind of the personality of what Ella is like. And then my 16-year-old son is funny and smart and wise. Years ago, I was walking through the living room, and I noticed he had his little phone out watching YouTube, and I said, "What are you watching?" And he said, "Well, I'm watching these guys play this video game." I said, "Wait a second, you're sitting there watching a video of other people play a game." I said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life." And so later that afternoon, he walked through the living room. I was watching TV. He paused. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, well, I'm watching this replay of this old Arkansas football game. He goes, you're watching a video of other people playing a game. That's the dumbest thing you've ever heard of in your entire life. And so that's kind of the family I deal with on a regular basis. Love them. We love being in the greater Sacramento region, and we're having a great time. I want to base this whole conversation tonight just on one very simple question. And it's this: what do you want in marriage? What is it that you're looking for? Here's what fascinates me in this relationship that is so dramatically important that I think the statistics are something like 95% of everybody gets married at some point in their life. Chances are, if you desire to be married, you will get married at some point. So this relationship that we find so integral and important to our lives, we put very little thought in to what we actually desire in that relationship, and then very little effort many times in how we can go about getting what it is that we desire. So tonight, I just want to kind of give you a basic concept of what I call designing the marriage you want. How is it that you can get the marriage that you actually desire? And one of the reasons that I travel the country, one of the reasons I'm willing to come to you via my living room on a Friday night is I think there is so much potential that people do not realize. I think many people are dealing with the relationship that they just kind of ended up with no intention, with no instruction, with no knowledge, with no work, with no effort. They just kind of drift into this relationship. And for many, it's good. For some, it's not so good. 74% of all couples will say and describe their marriage as happy, as successful. So for many, it's good. For others, it's not. I think all of us go through difficult times. But what amazes me is with just a little bit of intention, with a little bit of work, of effort, the direction that we could go and the return on investment that we could actually begin to experience. And this is one reason I applaud Celebrate Church. It's one reason I applaud you for being here tonight. You've made an intentional act to begin to work on your relationship, which I think is a very powerful thing. And I think whatever couple is there, whatever individual is there, I think if you desire to experience something even better than what you have right now, you can do so. And the pathway to make that happen now is through some intention, some attention, some intention, some effort, some learning, some growth. And I think with just a little bit of effort, we can begin to see a giant return on investment. So I'm going to give you just basically what is a 3-step process to designing the marriage you want. But notice this: every marriage has a design. There's an old saying in the field of engineering. Anonymous said that every system is perfectly designed for the outcomes it is receiving. Every system is perfectly designed for the outcomes that it is receiving. Which what this means is, if there's an area in your marriage that you're dissatisfied, that you're not happy, you can actually look at how your marriage is constructed, how it's put together, that is leading to that outcome. And then if you will change the design, you'll actually begin to change the experience. Think about just an average relationship. I'm not saying this is you. I'm just saying this is one situation that some couples face that feels so unique, so foreign. But whenever they sit down and tell the story in front of a counselor, a professional, whatever, it actually becomes very predictable. So I'm going to kind of use my hands here. I realize that the river is a little off center there, but I'm going to use my hands here to help illustrate. Imagine if whenever I'm down here, I'm talking about what's going on below the surface. So we're going to have two individuals. We're going to have a wife and a husband. And what goes on below here is the emotions that they're feeling. And then what goes on up here is what's expressed. Meaning, this is what we see. This is what's going on the inside. So imagine you have just a very basic scenario. Hypothetically, would never happen at my house, did not happen in any way this afternoon. Imagine my wife, imagine a wife walks into the kitchen and sees the sink now filled with dishes. So she walks in, sees the sink now filled with dishes. Now imagine if what she feels now is taken advantage of, overlooked, unseen, unheard, unvalued. Now what she should do is, feeling those emotions, I can't, the husband now can't know that unless it's revealed to him. What she should do is bring those emotions to the surface and to say, hey, whenever I walk in a kitchen like this, what I feel is unseen, unheard, unvalued, unloved, taken advantage of. But so often we do not surface the emotions that we are feeling. Instead, what we do is we come with some sort of protest of the actual event that is before us. So rather than saying, hey, here's how these make me feel, let's say she then says, does nobody care about the dishes? A sense of protest now in what's going on. So whenever she says that, now what the husband could feel is he could feel shame, blame, attack in some way. And what he should do is surface that and to say, hey, the dishes are a very real issue. But whenever you say it in that way, and I want to get back to that issue, but whenever you say it in that way, it really kind of hurts me. And I feel attacked and blamed and shamed. Does nobody care about the dishes? Well, of course I care. I care about you. I care about this whole thing. You haven't asked, did I have time to do this? And so he should surface what he's feeling. But very few people have that type of maturity. And so instead of surfacing what he's feeling, he tends to get defensive. And so he might say, well, I didn't have time to do the dishes. I was at work all day, or I was taking care of the kids, or something like this. Now notice this. When he gets defensive, that causes her to feel even more unseen, unheard, unvalued, unloved. And whenever she feels even more unseen, unheard, unvalued, unloved, rather than bringing that to the surface, she would tend to protest now even more. Well, you never care about the dishes. Nobody ever cares about the dishes, which now speaks to his emotions and can cause him to feel even more shamed and blamed and attacked, to where he will either, generally speaking, he will either surface, not those emotions, but he will then surface either a greater defense, or he'll just emotionally shut down. You can only take so much shame and blame, and so he'll just kind of check out. Or he creates a greater defense, which is, well, you don't care about anything either. And so the other day I did this and you didn't care, and I've worked all week and you haven't talked about it. And what happens is when he creates a greater defense, that causes her to feel even more unseen, unheard, unvalued, unloved, to protest even more, to create even more shame, to create even a greater defense, which creates even a more unseen. And you begin to see, if you can see on the screen, this idea, it's what psychologists now call the infinity loop. Now think about what's happening here. If you're in the situation, this feels so foreign and unique, and an attack on your own identity. It feels as though you're totally separated from this other person. It can feel that so unique. And yet, if you take that into a counselor's office, it is the most common form of a fight that any couple has. So this very thing that feels so unusual is actually extremely predictable. And the way that the design of the relationship is working, with one protesting and one getting defensive, and neither one surfacing the emotions that are actually going on underneath, and us fighting over the surface issues and not unearthing what we're actually feeling in this moment, creates the very relationship to where you're literally playing off each other. Psychologists call this the negative cycle. And here's the thing: if your cycle doesn't look exactly like that, every couple has a negative cycle where one of you does one thing, the other responds in a way that doesn't mend the relationship. It creates a heightened alert in the other, which creates a heightened alert in the other. And you begin to play off of each other. And your relationship of communication, whenever you fight in that way, is actually designed to create the outcome that you're experiencing. And if you will create a new design, if somebody will come to the realization of, hey, we're not dealing with the emotions that are going on underneath. Let's come back to the surface issue, and you have to. Imagine if from the very get-go, I asked some couples one time, hey, how do you stop this infinity cycle? And a man said, hey, next time she should raise that issue in a better way. Yeah, blame the wife. That's a great way to go about solving this specific issue. That's not the thing. The thing is, neither one of them at any point stopped and said, all right, what are we actually feeling? And how can we speak to that? Now, notice, many times this is the type of relationship between men and women where the woman protests, the man gets defensive. But notice this. Then when it comes to intimacy, they switch. And so let's say the man feels unseen, unheard, unvalued, unloved, and he wants to have intimacy. And for whatever reason, she has said no. Instead of raising that issue and saying, hey, I feel unheard, unseen, unvalued, unloved, I need connection with you, he will protest and say, well, I thought we were going to have sex tonight. She will feel blamed, shamed, guilted, but instead of raising those issues, she will then get defensive in some way and say, well, I thought we had it the other night. I thought you enjoyed it the other night, which causes, whenever she gets defensive, that causes him to feel even more unseen, unheard, unvalued, and unloved. And he'll protest even more. He might say, are we ever going to have intimacy again? Which causes her to feel even more shamed and blamed, which she will either emotionally shut down or get even more defensive, which then causes him to feel even more unseen. And once again, the infinity loop begins once again, but now with the roles actually reversed. But notice, there's a design that's there. Your marriage in every single area has a very specific design that is leading to the outcomes that you are actually receiving. And in the areas in which you like what you are receiving, you need to make sure that design stays in place. But in the areas in which you do not like what you are experiencing in this moment, maybe communication is disconnected, maybe intimacy isn't being prioritized, maybe there's not a sense of partnership around the house, maybe you don't feel this close sense of friendship. There's a disconnect emotionally. One time you were together and now you're not. All those things, if there's an outcome you currently do not like, if you will change the design, you'll actually begin to change the outcome. So we began with the question, what is it that you want? Well, here's the thing. I think you need to look within your own heart and mind and ask, what do I want in marriage? But here's the truth. I think we already know what you want. There has never been a day in which psychology, has so figured out and understood what it takes to make marriage work. And one of the things I love about this is a good amount of the research within secular psychology is actually confirming what I think the Bible has long ago taught of what you actually want. And here is what you want in your marriage. You want what is called a secure attachment. That's the phrase psychologists use. A secure attachment. Now, what does that mean exactly? Think about this. I was flying back. So my family's still in Arkansas. And a few months ago, I was flying back from Arkansas to Sacramento. And so I was on Southwest. And I don't know why Southwest doesn't have chargers on their planes for their phones, but at this point they don't. They're getting them. But I was flying from Tulsa, Oklahoma into Vegas and Vegas to Sacramento. And I was watching a game on my phone, and my phone was dying. And I noticed my phone was very quickly dying. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it into Vegas and still watch my phone. But I knew whenever I got to the airport in Vegas, I was going to have to charge my phone extremely quickly because if not, then I would be on a plane from Vegas to Sacramento. I didn't bring a book with me. I had nothing else. All I had was my phone. And if it didn't work, I would literally be sitting in a seat staring straight forward like a serial killer. And that's what I wanted whatsoever. So as soon as I got to the airport, I went, made sure I charged my phone. And they had these little triangles in between the seats, and the place was packed. Then I finally found an empty seat, and I got my phone out and I plugged it in right above me. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but it's like somebody had taken a screwdriver and kind of drilled out the plug. So whenever I put my phone charger in, it just kind of fell and it wouldn't stick. And so, okay, so I fiddled with it a little bit. Finally, I held it up and I held it up and it would begin to get some charge. But I began to notice that as I held it up, there'd be times I'd be looking at my phone and I thought I was charging it when I actually wasn't. And so notice what was happening is it was taking more effort for less rejuvenation for my phone. And finally, I saw over on the wall an old traditional kind of plug. And there was somebody who was there and they kind of started getting up and getting their stuff ready. I noticed somebody else kind of eyed the same person, was going to take over the same spot I wanted to take over. So I got my stuff together real fast and I kind of hurried over there. I shoved the other person out of the way to make sure that they didn't get it first. And I plugged my phone in. And you felt the feeling before. The moment I plugged it in, I felt it. There was a secure connection. The moment it was in. And the moment I did that, I didn't have to keep on holding it up. I didn't have to keep on checking my phone to make sure my phone was charging. I knew the moment it went in, just by the feeling alone, I knew my phone is getting replenished, it's getting recharged, and then I could make it to my flight. Here's my concern with many marriages. We are having to put in a whole lot more extra effort and still getting far less rejuvenation than what we actually could get if we could create a secure attachment. And what I would encourage you to do is within your relationship, begin to figure out what is it going to take that for us to have a secure attachment with each other, where we generally feel seen, heard, loved, valued, trusted, respected. When we make mistakes, we have a design in which it is owned, it is admitted, it is forgiveness is given, forgiveness is received. Now, what would it be like if marriage just didn't become easy by all means, but what if it became easier? And here's what I think the truth is. And I get every relationship is different, but when people say marriage is the hardest thing they've ever done, I don't get that. I don't think it has to be that way. I think definitely there can be difficult seasons. There's no question. But here's the truth for me. Loving Jenny might be the easiest thing I get to do. Now, there's difficult times, no question. There's times that I'm exposed for the sinful man that I am. There's times that I don't live up to my own standard. It's not uncommon for Jenny on occasion to fun lovingly and yet truthfully say, "Hey, didn't you write that this is what a husband is supposed to do?" And I quickly remind her that is for other people. That is not for us, that we have a different relationship. So no question, there are difficult seasons and times and all those kind of things. But here's what I can tell you, that after 24 years of dedication, of work, of all these things, we are seeing a return on investment And we have begun to create a marriage that, generally speaking, has a secure connection. And because there is that secure connection, it actually takes less energy for us than some others, and we get more replenishment than some other people get. So what does a secure attachment look like? And I'm just going to kind of use my illustration of friends, partners, and lovers. So Genesis chapter 2, about 15 years ago, I began to look at what does it take to really make a marriage work? And you look at Genesis 2, before sin entered the world, how did God design marriage? And the way that he designed marriage, I think he's going to, whenever he had Adam says, not good for man to be alone, he said, I'm going to make a helper fit for him. And then the passage ends, obviously, with the phrase, they were naked and were not ashamed. So a helper means that there's a task, and we have a task even today. It's called the cultural mandate. You and I were created by God to do something, and it's better to do that with somebody else than alone. And yet the helper fit for him, the fitness. Now, what was so unique about that? What was unique about that was that Eve would be like Adam, different, but like Adam, as opposed to all the animals that were all of a different species. Eve was going to be similar, and yet with some little bit of difference. And to me, that is the concept of what friendship looks like. So a helper is partnership, a fit for him is friendship, and then at the very end of the chapter, you have that idea of intimacy. So here's what I want to do. I've never done this before via Zoom. I've done this all over the country, though. I can kind of see some of you. I feel bad for those who are specifically on the Zoom at this moment. For instance, if I were wearing yellow, hypothetically, then I'm literally zeroed in on you at this very moment, speaking directly to you, because you are who I can see the absolute best right in the center of the screen. My apologies to you. But so here's what I want you to do. I want everybody in the room to stand up. It teaches me how long the delay actually is. That's good. Okay, and if your significant other is in the room, grab them by the hand and stand right beside them. If your significant other is not in the room, do not grab anybody by the hand. Okay. This to me is what friendship looks like. Friendship is, if Jenny were here, she's not, she's downstairs grilling, cooking dinner. I can't wait. So friendship is we're holding hands and we're walking through life together. And what I love about this image is it's not I'm way out in front of Jenny, dragging her behind. She's not way out in front of me, dragging me. I'm not over her, lording over her. She's not over me, lording over me. Instead, we are walking through life hand in hand, side by side, together. What I always say, we are walking through life equally ignorant. Neither one of us know what this is going to take. And here we go, hand in hand through life. And this idea of friendship now is built on the concept of trust. Even the idea of holding hands. Remember, the old idea of shaking hands was to show that you're unarmed. Now, I'm from Arkansas. I recognize if your right hand is empty, that doesn't mean there's not a gun on your left-hand side. That's very possible. So this doesn't mean that you're unarmed. But metaphorically speaking, it does show that in this relationship, I'm going to let the guard down. And so that is built on trust. And trust is this basic idea that I can lay my heart out on the line, and I know Jenny is going to use my heart in a right way. She's going to receive it. She's never going to try to intentionally hurt it. If she does accidentally hurt it, she's going to learn and apologize and never do it again. I can put my whole heart out on the table knowing she's going to treat me right. I say all the time about Jenny, she loves me and she's for me. She loves me and she's for me. And so when I leave the house on a Sunday morning and I'm about to go preach to a few thousand people, if Jenny looks at me and goes, "Are you going to wear that?" I remind myself, she loves me and she's for me. She's not trying to embarrass me. She's just trying to make sure that I look okay on stage. And so I even asked her tonight, is this shirt okay from about the belly button up? You don't know I have gym shorts on and no shoes right now. I am from Arkansas, so you probably guessed that. But she looks at these things. So there's a trust that is there that we're going to treat each other's heart in a proper way. All right, now turn back to back. See how well I can give these instructions without Jenny here. There you go, back to back. All right, this is what partnership looks like. So the idea of partnership, imagine if Jenny were here right behind me. The idea of partnership now is I can scan the horizon 180 degrees this way, looking for threats and opportunities. Jenny can scan the horizon 180 degrees this way, looking for threats and opportunities. If I see something that I need her attention, we can both turn our attention in that way. But if I don't need her, I can take care of what's going on here. She can take care of what's going on there, and everything's great. There's no problem whatsoever. And what happens now in the midst of a good partnership, my strengths are multiplied and my weaknesses are divided. You see, if I'm bad at something, but Jenny is good at something, we can lean on her. And suddenly it's like I'm not even bad at it at all. As a matter of fact, social scientists say that if you know that your spouse is going to remember something, you don't even store that information in your brain. That literally you use your spouse's headspace now as an external hard drive to help keep your brain free and clear. That's the reason, guys, that sometimes maybe she doesn't remember when to change the oil or when to do those kinds of things. That's actually a trust. When she forgets, that's actually a trust in you. In the same way, ladies, sometimes whenever he doesn't remember some of the things that you think he should remember, take that as that's a sign of respect and trust for you. He's using your brain now as an external hard drive. That's the sign of a healthy relationship. The very thing that irritates you could actually be the sign of a healthy relationship. Now, guys, you still need to remember the birthdays, the anniversaries, things like that. I actually have to remind Jenny of our anniversary if you want to know the truth, how our relationship works. But here's the thing about this partnership. It's built on the idea of respect. What respect says is you have skills, ideas, thoughts that you bring to the table, and I can trust my life with you, and you can trust your life with me. And we are actually better together than we would be apart. Now turn face to face. Now this is now what intimacy looks like. That Jenny sees me completely and loves me totally. It doesn't mean that what she sees is perfection. Matter of fact, some of the things that she sees need to be improved. And so in this context of a loving climate, we begin to improve it. However, there is this vulnerability, and it's not just a physical vulnerability. It is also an emotional vulnerability, a spiritual vulnerability. Think about what vulnerability is. Think about it in the physical form of intimacy. To be vulnerable means I'm going to reveal to the one what I keep hidden from everybody else. And so what we do physically now is a model for what we're supposed to do emotionally and spiritually and mentally. Okay, sit down for a little bit because y'all aren't paying attention to me now. I can get the sense now. Suddenly you made eye contact with each other and the Zoom call went away and y'all were focused in on each other. So this idea of friend, partner, and lover, think about it like the three prongs that go into an electrical socket, that whenever you put them in, whenever you get these relationships right, they go in and they form a secure connection. But if one of these prongs is off just a little bit, then what's going to happen there is it's not going to be as stable, and it's going to take more energy from you to get less of a return. So I wonder, if you were to look at these three areas of life, and notice they're all equal. It's not that friendship is the most important and partnership is the second most important, and yeah, intimacy is there. It's not that. It's also not that intimacy is the most important. It's that all three of these roles are vital to a healthy relationship. If you were to look at your relationship, which area would you say is the strongest? And then which area might need the more work? If you want to, I have a website called changetheodds.com. We're trying to change the odds of marriage. So changetheodds.com. If you will go there, we actually have a little free assessment that you can take that in just 4 minutes, it can give you a score of what your friendship score looks like, what your partnership score looks like, and what your intimacy score looks like. And I put that together with some licensed marriage and family therapists, and it will ask some questions that maybe you don't expect to ask, and it will kind of ignore some things that you might think are important that really, when it comes to marriage, actually aren't that important. Matter of fact, John Gottman will say that healthy couples actually generally don't fight much differently than unhealthy couples. What we think is this important thing whenever it comes to marriage, he says, isn't necessarily the most important thing, but some other things are. So changetheodds.com will give you that score. But let's just kind of quickly walk through friendship, partnership, and intimacy, and then I'll let you get about the rest of your evening. This idea of friendship, to me, again, built on trust. One example that I have with that concept of what it means is just this idea of attention. So the very first question I ask on that marriage assessment is an issue of attention to see how your friendship is. And it simply says this: can you easily get your spouse's attention when you need it? And do you have it on a regular occurrence? So do you regularly have your spouse's attention? And can you easily get it when you need it? Now, here's an interesting thing. Here at our church here at Bayside, here in California, we had 7,000 people take this assessment whenever our church kind of did this specific task. And 85% said they do not regularly have their spouse's attention or could not easily get it when they need it. 85%. The number one issue of our day, whenever it comes to marriage, I believe, is the issue of attention. Because here's the thing. We have all these things that are trying to steal our attention. And just 2 hours from me, there are 5 or 6 major companies, Google, Apple, YouTube, Twitter. Twitter might have just moved, but they're spending billions of dollars to try to get your attention. And whenever they get your attention, who loses it? So often it's the people that you love the absolute most. I remember when the kids were little, Jenny was out of town. And so I was going to take them to McDonald's primarily for me more than so for them. And so we get to McDonald's, I get them their Happy Meals, everything is set up. And I see this older couple over to the side. And I just began fascinated by them as I watched how they interacted. So on the table were 2 cookies, 2 cups of coffee, and they were both reading the paper. Remember the newspaper? So if you're young, you can ask a neighbor what a newspaper is. But they were reading this newspaper. And I think he was like doing the crossword puzzle and she was reading something. And I began to watch how they would interact. Then on occasion, he would put the paper down, get her attention, and they would work the crossword together. And then he'd go back to his thing. And then she would put the paper down and call attention to a story. And they would interact for just a moment. And it was this beautiful kind of interacting of weaving of what's going on. And what John Gottman calls that is he calls that bids of attention. He says, anytime you ask your spouse, hey, look at this. Hey, can you interact with me? That is a bid of attention. And when your friendship is healthy, you respond to bids of attention about 7 out of 10 times. So about 70% of the time when your spouse asks for your attention, you reciprocate with attention. Now notice this. It's not 100%. It can never be 100%. We're busy people. We're raising kids. We got jobs. It can never be 100%. But Gottman calls those couples that do it 70% of the time the masters of relationships because their friendship score is high. But notice this. What he calls the disasters of relationship only do it 4 out of 10 times, which means a majority of the time in which a spouse asks for attention, the other spouse does not grant that attention. And think about how over time that begins to erode your connection with each other, erode your trust, erode your belief that they are for you and that they love you. If there's one way that you can change your amount of friendship, it is to create a pattern in which you regularly have each other's attention, and then also create a system in which you can easily get your spouse's attention. If my wife calls me from downstairs right now, I'm going to ignore the call. If she calls twice, I'm going to see what's going on. She knows what I'm doing right now. We have a system where she can, no matter what I'm doing, get my attention and know that all my attention is going to turn to her in the moment. Have you created that? And then do you have a regular pattern in which you're giving each other attention? For me and Jenny, it's this. About 5 days out of the week, we go for a walk. We have a 20-minute loop. We have a 45-minute loop. We prefer the 45-minute loop, but if we don't have time, we'll just do the 20-minute loop. And what we do during that time is we just catch up. It's not about the business of the day. It's not about who's going to take who where tomorrow. It is literally, how is your heart? What's going on? To such an extent, whenever we haven't taken a walk in a while, because let's say, so it doesn't rain in where I am in California, it doesn't rain between Mother's Day and Halloween. But after Halloween in November, once it starts raining again, if we go several days without a walk, I'll be able to feel it. Our friendship now is built on this time. For you, it doesn't have to be a walk, but what is it for you? How are you making sure that you spend time with each other and there's this sense of trust? How can you build your friendship score? Now think about this idea of partnership. Partnership is based on some unified similarities and then some appreciated differences. I think about it like a triangle. So imagine the top of the triangle here, and it kind of comes down in that way. Up here is Jenny and I together. Down here is me. Over here is her. And so we have these differences. And actually, the further apart we are, the more different we are, As long as we're unified under some similarities, actually the stronger we actually become. Jenny and I, in some ways, could not be more different people, but we are unified in purpose, in mission, and bringing glory to God and loving each other well and creating a healthy family. And those unifying similarities now allow us to appreciate how radically different we are. Whenever we moved here from Arkansas, I was wrapping up. I was a lead pastor at a church for 13 years, on staff for 19, but lead pastor for 13. And so I had to kind of shut things down there. I didn't have time to come out to California and to buy a house. So Jenny came out, and I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but apparently they value homes more in California than they do in Arkansas because they were a little bit more expensive than I ever even dreamed or imagined. So literally the greatest financial decision of our entire lives, Jenny made without me being here. So she would take pictures, she would call me, she would do all those things, but she found the house, she bought the house, all without my presence here. Well, how does that go on? How can we make the largest financial decision of our entire lives in that way? It's because I respect her. It's because I know she's wise, she's looking out for me, I would look out for her. There is such a respect in who she is. Jenny owns her own advertising company, so whenever we go to buy a car, we'll both go. But at the end, when it's time to negotiate, I'll leave the room. Why? I'm a pastor. I'll feel bad for the salesperson. I'll actually increase what we're going to pay to raise his commission because it's my pastoral duty. Jenny will get him down as low as he will possibly go and will feel no remorse for it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, be a little proud of how cheaply she got the car. And so I know whenever it comes to negotiation, she's going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So she flies out to Sacramento, buys the house. Now she's going to fly home. And as she's flying home, she calls me and she says, Kevin, I'm in the airport, but I've lost my driver's license. And I said, okay, where did you have it last? She said, I had it on the tram from the rental car. And I said, all right, get on the phone, call the rental car company. They'll find it. She goes, I've already done that. She said, that's not the problem. The problem is I'm going to miss my flight. And I said, hey, do you have the backpack I always travel with? There's just one backpack I always travel with. And when I'm not with her, she tends to carry it. And she said, yeah, I do. I said, okay, open up the second zipper, go halfway down. There's a pouch. And inside that pouch is your passport. And she opened the second zipper, went halfway down, opened up, found the passport. She said, Kevin, why do you have my passport? I said, it was in case you ever lost your driver's license. You see, Jenny always takes her driver's license out, sticks it in her pocket. And I always thought that's going to fall out one day. And one day, whenever that falls out and we're running late for a flight, I do not want to have the dilemma of whether or not I go get on the plane and go wherever we're going and leave her behind, or am I going to have to stay behind too? And so to solve that, I just stole her passport, put it in my backpack. That way I would always have it because I knew I would never lose it, and she definitely would. Differences, respected differences. She can negotiate far better than me. I can make sure that we have all proper travel documentation to actually get on the phone. And it is not a point of contention. It is a point of appreciation. And in a strong partnership, you see the differences as a potential and an opportunity, whereas in an unhealthy partnership, you actually see them as a threat and then a danger. So friendship, partnership, and then you have this idea of intimacy. And intimacy, I get, is a difficult topic. There's no question. But John Gottman has basically said this: whenever it comes to intimacy, it all comes down to this very basic premise. Good friends who prioritize sex. That's it. So it begins with good friendship. It does begin with this idea of trust. I would say that trust plus respect leads to vulnerability. So whenever you trust each other, you're for each other. Whenever you respect each other, all you then have to do as you build that is to begin to prioritize the intimate experience. And I'm gonna close with this basic concept because I'm out of time. But here's my definition of what healthy intimacy looks like in a marriage. It is a mutual pursuit of mutual pleasure for the purpose of mutual connection. So think about pursuit, pleasure, connection. So the purpose of intimacy ultimately is an emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual connection. That's the goal. Now, how do you achieve that? Well, you achieve that now as you mutually together, you pursue pleasure for both of you. Here's the great problem whenever it comes to intimacy for many, specifically in the church, but culture itself. Sex far too often just becomes about the man's experience at the expense of the woman. When we serve a God who created male and female within his image, he created us to enjoy now sex and intimacy. And yet our culture has skewed what is the biblical design and taken it now solely toward the man's experience. And here's the truth. When the man is enjoying the experience and the woman isn't enjoying the experience, there's going to be a great deal of contention over frequency, over change, over all those things. But when both are both are experiencing mutual pleasure, all those other issues tend to go away. Basically, I can say this: if you will prioritize the woman's experience in the bedroom, everybody's going to be happy. That's just the truth. Sex that's good for her is rarely bad for him. And yet what happens is we do not mutually pursue that mutual pleasure, which oftentimes prevents us from having this kind of mutual connection. What you want in marriage now is a strong connection. And having a friend who's always by your side, a partner who always has your back, and a lover who sees you and loves you completely is the very connection that you want. How can you design your relationship to get to that end game? Figure that out, and it will forever change your marriage. Thanks so much for having me.